The 1970s. An era of shag carpet, mood rings, the Bee Gees, gas lines longer than a Pink Floyd guitar solo. It was a decade where everything burned bright. Lava lamps, polyester pants, and occasionally your compact car. Welcome to Auto Chatter. Enter the Ford Pinto, a car so controversial it became a punchline, a case study, and a pop culture relic, all rolled into one dangerously lightweight package. But where did it come from? Why did it explode? And why did over 3 million Americans still say, sure, I'll take one? Strap in, preferably not in the back seat, as we take a deep dive into the fast, frugal, and potentially flammable world of the Ford Pinto. As always, facts, opinion, and speculation will be given. Give a like if you enjoyed it, and comments are welcome. Now let's get started. Let's rewind to 1968. Ford was feeling the heat. The Volkswagen Beetle was dominating the import market, and Japanese cars like the Toyota Corolla and Datsun 510 were quietly rising like David Cassidy posters in a teenage girl's bedroom. So Ford President Lee Iacocca demanded a new car. Not just any car, a small one, a cheap one, something under 2,000 pounds, under 2,000 bucks, and ready in just 25 months. Normal development time for a car in the 60s was about 43 months. So the number of corners they may have cut? All of them. Ford engineers rushed to make Iacocca's dream a reality, and in September 1970, the 71 Ford Pinto hit the market, starting at $1,919, or about $15,000 today. Base power was a 1.6-liter inline 4 from Ford of Europe, with about 75-ish horsepower. Transmissions was a 4-speed manual or a 3-speed automatic. Weight, 1,949 pounds. 0 to 60, about 14 and a half seconds, give or take a disco ball. Miles per gallon could achieve up to 30. Adjusted for inflation, it was about 15 grand. The Pinto was a no-frills machine. No air conditioning, no power steering, no glove box door until later models. Heck, no armrests either. It was like a Flintstones car with a slightly better sound system. And yet, people loved it. Ford sold 352,402 Pintos in the first year. For 72, a runabout hatchback was introduced, adding actual cargo practicality. The wagon version also arrives because it's the 1970s. There's an engine upgrade option. You can get a 2-liter inline 4 from Ford of Germany at about 98 horses. Optional vinyl roof for those that want a little more flair. Sales were about 480,405 that year. Fun fact, Ford actually had to extend the hood to meet U.S. safety standards, making the Pinto longer than most subcompacts. 1973 was a gas crunch and big bumpers. 5-mile-an-hour bumper mandates kicked in, a little chunkier front bumper. Sales hit 488,487, and the first OPEC oil crisis was lending a hand to boost those numbers. Price was about $14,700 in today's bucks. Fuel economy becomes the Pinto's main bragging rights. Meanwhile, Crocodile Rock was topping the charts, and people were rocking out in hatchbacks that could ignite faster than Elton John's wardrobe. For 74, rear bumper was enlarged to meet new crash standards. Ironically, not enough, as we find out later. Optional 2.3-liter Lima engine was introduced, more torque, less speed. Price is still about $14,500 in today's money. Sales, 544,209. Best-selling year for the Pinto. This was also the year journalists started to whisper about the rear-end fire issues. 75 is the year the Pinto starts to feel a little heat. The rear bumper improvements were quietly added, but the gas tank was still unshielded. Pinto gets a new grille, because changing your face is easier than changing your gas tank. Sales dropped to 223,763, partially due to bad press and better Japanese rivals. By the way, introduced in 75 in the US was the Mercury Bobcat. This was a Pinto in a tuxedo t-shirt, basically. It had more chrome, fancier grille, same engine, same flammability potential, slightly better interior, and it was about $100 to $300 more. It was like buying boxed wine, but with a cork. Canada started getting Bobcats in 1974. By 76, Ford finally adds some rubber isolators and shields to the fuel tank, quietly. Pintos earned better safety ratings in some tests. 1977 sales rebound to 438,216 thanks to a new marketing ad and the cruising wagon, a shagadelic porthole windowed Pinto aimed at the custom van crowd. Paint options included orange, lime green, and root beer brown, all very Brady Bunch. 1978 we can call the lawsuit year. The infamous Grimshaw versus Ford Motor Company trial begins. Ford is accused of knowing about the gas tank flaw and not fixing it to save $11 per car. Sales dropped to 203,816. Public trust in the Pinto becomes as thin as bell-bottom jeans in a rainstorm. Ford issues a recall of 1.5 million Pintos and Bobcats for fuel system fixes. It's one of the largest recalls in automotive history up to that point. Now let's talk about the Pinto's hottest controversy, literally. By the mid-70s, whispers turned into headlines. The Pinto had a dangerous flaw in its design that could cause it to burst into flames in rear-end collisions. The problem centered on the fuel tank, which was located just behind the rear axle, dangerously close to the rear bumper. This did not affect the wagons, as they were long enough in the back to help prevent this. The tank could be punctured by protruding bolts or deformed by the differential housing. The fuel filler neck could rip loose, spilling gasoline. Sparks from metal-on-metal contact could ignite leaking fuel. In other words, a fender bender could become a Michael Bay scene. Ford had something in '73 that became known as the Pinto Memo. It was an internal one, revealing something kind of chilling. The company had weighed the cost of human life against the cost of fixing the problem. One document laid it out like a spreadsheet. Cost of reinforcing the tank, $11. Number of affected vehicles, 11 million. Total fixed costs, 113 million. Compare that to projected liability for burn deaths and injuries, only 49.5 million. In business terms, don't fix it. In human terms, yikes. In August 1977, Mother Jones magazine published an article titled Pinto Madness, detailing the design flaws, the memos, and Ford's decision not to recall the car. The article claimed between 500 and 900 people had died in Pinto fires. Ford had full knowledge of the danger. The company resisted change due to costs. It was a PR nightmare. The Pinto became the poster child for corporate greed and disregard for safety. After years of denial and growing public pressure, Ford recalled 1.5 million 71 to 76 Pintos and 75 and 76 Mercury Bobcats on June 9, 1978, one of the largest automotive recalls in U.S. history at that time. The recall fixes included adding a plastic shield between the differential and fuel tank, installing longer filler necks to prevent tearing, adding reinforced plates to the tank, adding rubber pads and sleeves to prevent punctures. Ford paid for all the work, but the damage was done, both to its reputation and the Pinto's resale value. Unfortunately for Ford, the recall was not the end of the firestorm. In '72, a 13-year-old Richard Grimshaw was riding in a '72 Pinto in California when it was rear-ended by a Ford Galaxy. The Pinto burst into flames. Richard was unfortunately horribly burned, and the driver passed on. By 1981, the Grimshaw family sued Ford and was awarded $2.5 million in actual damages and $125 million in punitive damages that was later reduced. The court cited Ford's knowledge of the defect and refusal to act. It remains one of the most famous product liability cases ever and a go-to in law school ethics classes. But it can't get worse, right? Well, in 1979, Ford was indicted for criminal homicide in Indiana after 3 teenage girls died when their Pinto was rear-ended and exploded. It was the first time a U.S. corporation had faced criminal charges for a defective product. Though Ford was acquitted, the case made national news and further tanked the Pinto's image. An article was published in Rutgers Law Review years later in 1991 and challenged much of the hoopla surrounding the Pinto and its tendency to increase coffin sales. Key points raised included the number of reported fires relative to how many were built, which, as we know, now was a lot, really wasn't high. It was actually lower than some same-class competitors. The cars were actually safer fatality-wise to many rivals then, too, counting all accident types. So was the Pinto controversy overblown for ratings? Maybe. Let me know what you think in the comments. Anyway, Pinto sales limp along by 79. Everyone's moving on to small cars like the Honda Civic and Volkswagen Rabbit. Sales was about 200,000 for 79 and 185,000 for 1980. Their tarnished reputation and older design still managed to be offset slightly by the second oil crisis and cheap prices that started around $12,400 in 2025 money. The headlights were now square for 79, making it look a little less like your neighbor's 8-year-old one. Ford replaces the Pinto with the front-wheel drive Escort in 81, and it goes on to become a successful car in its own right for the next decade. The Pinto didn't just give us a car, it gave us the term Pinto Memo, shorthand for corporate negligence. It was a cautionary tale in business ethics and cost-benefit analysis. A car that actually sold really well, despite the risks. It's taught in business schools, it's mocked on sitcoms, and it's left a scorched but unforgettable rubber streak across the automotive history. Anyway, this is my Ford Pinto chatter, a car that potentially lit up the road, for better or worse. It may have gone out with a huge bang, but at least it did so in style, and under budget. Hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, I'll be keeping the headlights on for you, and chatter out.